The markets of Jara 9 buzzed with their usual frenzy. Humans, Jari traders, and merchants from planets even further away bartered and negotiated, voices blending into a chaotic symphony of languages. Caleb Foster, a human diplomat on a routine visit, found himself swept up in the noise. He'd heard tales of the galaxy's strange customs, but what he encountered next was beyond his darkest suspicions. On a raised platform, a young Jari female with pale silver scales and wide amber eyes stood bound, her head lowered as an elder announced her fate. Her name, whispered through the crowd, was Rena. Caleb's stomach twisted as he realized that this wasn't some trade arrangement. She was being sold. The elder's voice droned on about her family's debts and how this sale would redeem their honor. It was wrong. This was not what he expected on his diplomatic mission. As the bidding started, Caleb's heart raced. He had no intention of participating in Jari politics or challenging their customs. But the girl's hollow gaze met his, and something unexplainable surged within him. She looked terrified yet resigned, her spirit nearly broken. And in that single glance, Caleb knew he couldn't walk away. Before he could second-guess himself, his voice rang out, firm and decisive, silencing the crowd. 500 credits, he announced, surprising even himself. A murmur passed through the audience as Jari officials exchanged baffled glances. Bidding wasn't open to outsiders, yet Caleb's defiance halted any objections. The auctioneer's brows furrowed, but no one dared challenge the human. Moments later, Rena was released, her chains clinking to the ground. Stepping forward, Caleb gently guided her down from the platform, his expression soft yet resolute. "My name is Caleb," he whispered, hoping to ease her fear. "You're safe now." She stared up at him, distrust mingling with disbelief. I don't understand," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Why would you?" Her words trailed off, lost in the confusion and overwhelming relief. Caleb simply offered a reassuring nod and guided her toward his ship, determined to free her and get her off the planet before any objections could form. Caleb barely had time to catch his breath before alarms sounded across the market. Jari guards in thick armor flooded the platform, and a voice crackled through a loudspeaker. "Human, halt and surrender the girl immediately." He tightened his grip on Rena's arm, his eyes scanning for an escape route. Just as he spotted an alleyway, 2 guards blocked their path, eyes cold and hands resting on the hilts of plasma rifles. With one quick motion, Caleb lifted his wrist comm and activated a small beacon. Within moments, the hum of his ship's engines sounded overhead. "Come on, Rena," he said urgently, guiding her through a maze of tight corridors, his eyes darting back to check for their pursuers. She kept pace with him, fear in her eyes, but there was something else too, a spark of hope. They reached a small clearing where the ship hovered just above ground. The ramp lowered. Caleb rushed them aboard, barely managing to close the hatch as plasma bolts pinged off the ship's hull. He bolted to the cockpit and initiated takeoff, leaving the angry voices and flashing lights of Jara 9 behind. Inside the safe, sterile atmosphere of the ship, Caleb took a deep breath and turned to face Rena. She looked around, taking in the surroundings with a mix of wonder and apprehension. "Why did you do that?" she asked, breaking the silence. Caleb hesitated. "Because no one deserves to be sold like that," he replied, voice steady. "You're free now, Rena. Whatever that means for you, it's your choice from here on." For the first time, her lips curled into the faintest of smiles. But their moment was short-lived as a loud beeping sounded on the control panel. Caleb's stomach dropped. Jari patrol ships were closing in, broadcasting a demand for him to surrender. "Looks like we're not out of this yet," he muttered, gripping the controls. The Jari ships were fast and relentless, each swoop bringing them closer to Caleb's vessel. His ship, while equipped for standard diplomatic missions, was no match for a direct battle. As he navigated through asteroid fields and narrow corridors of space, the comms crackled to life. "Human vessel, surrender immediately or prepare to be fired upon." A Jari commander's voice barked. Caleb glanced at Rena, who sat rigidly in the co-pilot seat, her face pale. "They're not going to let us go easily, are they?" "No," she whispered, a mixture of guilt and fear evident in her gaze. "They see my life as payment, a debt they're determined to collect." A plan formed in Caleb's mind as he tapped into his ship's stealth systems. "Hang tight, Rena. I'm not letting them take you back." They dodged through asteroid fields, Caleb pushing the ship's limits as plasma bolts zipped past. Just when it seemed they might evade the patrols, another warning blasted through the ship's sensors. "Direct hit," Caleb muttered, trying to keep control. The hull shuddered and the lights flickered. But he wasn't about to give up. "Rena, there's an escape pod in the rear compartment. Get in. I'll try to send you somewhere safe." Her hand reached for his, trembling but firm. "No, I can't keep running. I want to stand with you, Caleb. Whatever it takes." Her determination ignited something in him, and with a determined nod, Caleb accelerated, veering sharply toward the nearest uncharted system. They'd find a way. Together. As Caleb maneuvered through the asteroid field, the Jari ships closing in behind, his mind raced with possibilities. His vessel wasn't built for combat, and the Jari made that painfully clear with each plasma bolt that struck the hull, rattling the ship and threatening to throw it off course. Rena held tightly to the co-pilot's chair, her fear barely masked by her steady resolve. There was no turning back now. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. "Caleb," Rena murmured, leaning close to watch the blip of their enemies on the radar. "Even if we escape them here, they'll pursue us across systems. Jari det laws are ruthless." Caleb met her gaze, seeing the weight of her burden in her silver eyes. "Then we'll make an ally they won't dare to cross." Rena looked at him with a mixture of confusion and hope. "An ally?" Caleb angled the ship toward a nearby star system, known for its neutral territories, a refuge for diplomats, traders, and sometimes outlaws who sought to avoid the reach of law enforcement. "There's a colony here with a strong alliance of neutral species. If we can reach them, we might find protection." The ship lurched as another shot struck the left thruster. Sparks flew across the control panel, and alarms screamed through the cockpit. Caleb pushed the ship harder, glancing over at Rena. "I just need you to hold on a little longer." The Jari ships remained relentless, growing closer with each passing second. Just when escape seemed impossible, they neared the colony's perimeter, a field lined with satellite defenses and automated drones designed to repel unauthorized vessels. "This colony's security is intense," Caleb explained, guiding the ship into the outer layer of the defense zone. "And they won't take kindly to an unannounced Jari invasion." As they passed through the perimeter, Caleb activated the distress beacon on the diplomatic frequency. "Human vessel requesting sanctuary," he broadcast, his voice strained. "We are under attack by Jari forces, requesting immediate assistance." A pause filled the airwaves before a deep voice replied. "Human vessel, identify yourself and your purpose within Alliance space." Caleb breathed a sigh of relief. "Caleb Renner, diplomatic envoy from Earth. I have a Jari passenger seeking asylum." Rena clutched his arm, her expression wary. "They might not be friendly toward the Jari, Caleb. This could go very badly." "Better than going back to a life of servitude," he replied, his voice steady. The voice over the comm returned. "Prepare to dock. You will be under immediate review by the Alliance Council." As Caleb steered the ship toward the colony's docking bay, the Jari vessels held their distance, watching from beyond the colony's perimeter. The tension hung thick in the air, but for the first time since their escape, Caleb felt a glimmer of hope. They disembarked under the watchful eyes of security personnel. An officer, towering with bluish skin and intricate facial markings, approached. "You're the human with the Jari fugitive." Rena flinched at the term, but Caleb stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "She's seeking sanctuary. The Jari sold her into servitude without her consent. I intervened." The officer scrutinized him, then Rena. The Alliance Council will decide her fate. For now, you're both under guard." He motioned to a group of guards, who escorted them through the bustling corridors of the colony toward a waiting chamber. Inside, they waited in silence. Rena sat beside Caleb, her hands clasped tightly, her thoughts a whirlwind. "I didn't want to put you in this much danger," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I didn't want to go back to a life of captivity either." Caleb reached for her hand, offering a reassuring squeeze. "Rena, no one deserves to be bound like that. You have a right to choose your life. And as long as I can help you do that, I will." Just then, the door slid open, and 3 members of the Alliance Council entered. Their robes signified different species and statuses within the council: an Elorian, a Trithar, and a human representative, each studying the pair with keen interest. The Elorian counselor, her green eyes glinting with curiosity, spoke first. "You, Caleb Renner, claim to have saved this Jari woman from forced servitude." Caleb nodded, explaining their escape and the Jari's determination to bring Rena back at any cost. As he spoke, he saw the counselors exchange glances, the weight of his words settling in. The human counselor turned to Rena. "Is it true, then? You are here seeking asylum from your own people?" Rena met the counselor's gaze, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Yes, my family sold me as payment for their debts. They see me as property, but I am not. I seek freedom to make my own life." A murmur swept through the counselors, and the Trithar counselor, with his multiple arms folded thoughtfully, addressed Caleb. "This action puts your people in direct conflict with the Jari. You are aware of the gravity of such a choice." "Yes," Caleb replied, his voice unwavering. "But it's a choice I'm willing to make. Humanity has always stood against oppression, and I won't abandon Rena now." The counselors leaned in, discussing in hushed tones, their voices an indistinct murmur. Finally, the Elorian counselor spoke again. "The Alliance stands as a bastion of sanctuary. The Jari debt laws may be their own, but they are not ours." A flicker of relief crossed Rena's face, and Caleb exhaled slowly. However, the Trithar counselor interjected. "You will remain within the colony's protection. Your presence will likely incite further Jari retaliation. Until further review, you will be under our protection but restricted from traveling freely." Rena nodded, gratitude evident in her expression. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The counselors dismissed them, and Caleb and Rena were escorted to temporary quarters within the colony. Though their situation was still tenuous, they finally had a glimmer of hope. For the first time, Rena allowed herself to imagine a future free from the chains of her past. As they settled into the quiet of their quarters, Caleb sat beside her. "This is only the beginning, you know," he said, offering her a small smile. "The Jari won't stop here." Rena looked out the window, where stars twinkled beyond the colony's protective field. "Let them come. I'd rather face them free than go back in chains." Her words stirred something powerful in Caleb, and he felt a renewed determination rising within him. Together, they had taken the first steps toward defiance, toward freedom. And with the support of the Alliance, they might just stand a chance against whatever came next. But they both knew this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The Jari would not forgive or forget easily, and Caleb and Rena's future was now bound to the stars and the unwavering resolve of their shared defiance. Life in the Alliance colony was both a relief and a strain. Though they'd escaped immediate danger, Caleb and Rena were under constant surveillance, the specter of Jari retaliation hanging over them like a dark cloud. Alliance forces were wary of escalation, and any sign of unrest could tip the scales back toward conflict. Caleb knew they were safe only as long as they could justify their presence, and as long as the Alliance believed in their cause. One evening, as they shared a quiet meal in their quarters, Rena gazed out the viewport, her thoughts far away. "Every day I feel like they're getting closer. The Jari can be very persuasive. Her voice trembled, the ever-present fear she tried to mask slipping through. Caleb placed his hand over hers, steady and reassuring. They can try, but we're not alone anymore. The Alliance wants peace, and they'll stand by us. But even as he spoke the words, doubts gnawed at the edges of his confidence. The Alliance Council's decision to shelter them had been met with mixed reactions within the colony. Some feared the Jari would target the colony, while others viewed the decision as a rare chance to oppose Jari dominance in their sector. Caleb and Rena's presence had become a dividing line, a spark that could ignite something far greater. Their uneasy peace was soon shattered. One morning, as Caleb was studying ship schematics in the colony's library, the alarms blared. His communicator buzzed with a series of urgent messages. He rushed back to their quarters to find Rena, her face pale, standing at the viewport. Outside, he could see it too. A Jari ship hovering at the edge of Alliance space, its massive form dwarfing most nearby vessels. Flanked by two smaller patrol ships, it pulsed ominously, projecting a clear message of menace. Caleb tapped into the colony's emergency network. Over the comms, the voice of a Jari commander rang out. "We know you harbor a fugitive of Jari law. Surrender her immediately, or prepare for consequences." The words were a chilling reminder of the Jari's reach, and for a moment, Caleb felt the cold hand of doubt. The colony's comms officer responded, their voice firm. "The Alliance colony does not recognize Jari debt law. Any attempts to breach our territory will be met with force." The Jari ship lingered, its threat implicit. But rather than withdrawing, it began to emit a low-frequency signal, a jamming field. Colony screens flickered as communication lines stuttered and static filled the air. Caleb looked at Rena, who clenched her hands tightly. "They're trying to disable the colony's defenses," she whispered, her face growing pale. "They know if they disrupt the Alliance's response time, they can strike before reinforcements arrive." Caleb felt the urgency rising in his chest. "We have to warn the Council. They need to prepare." Together, they raced through the halls toward the Council chamber, where Alliance leaders were already in a heated discussion, voices overlapping in tense, clipped tones. The human counselor, a tall, stern woman named Villa, turned to them as they entered. "Your presence here has attracted unwanted attention, Mr. Renner. We're at a critical juncture, and I need you to understand that harboring Jari fugitives isn't without risks. The Jari Empire doesn't make empty threats. Neither does the Alliance," Caleb replied, his tone as resolute as hers. "And the only way to stand against them is to show we're not afraid. If you give Rena up, it'll send a signal that their intimidation worked." The Trithar counselor raised a spindly hand, his voice calm but insistent. "We may hold to that position, but our resources are limited, and this is no small threat. There are larger political ramifications to consider." Just then, the entire room shook violently. Caleb braced himself against the wall, and a red emergency light began to flash. The Jari ship had fired a warning shot, hitting the colony's outer shield. Counselors and security officers rushed to their posts as the tension escalated. Caleb pulled Rena aside, speaking low but urgent. "We can't wait for them to decide. We have to get to the shield controls and reinforce them. If they take those out, this place will fall." Rena's eyes were wide, her mind racing through possibilities. "The control room isn't far from here, but it's bound to be swarming with security. They'll think we're trying to escape." "We're not escaping," Caleb assured her. "We're fighting." As they slipped through the hallways, the colony shuddered with each blast. They'd reached the control room only to find the entrance guarded by two Alliance officers. "Halt!" one of them shouted. "No unauthorized personnel beyond this point." Caleb held up his diplomatic badge. "We're not here to cause trouble. I'm a trained engineer, and if we don't reinforce those shields now, this colony won't stand a chance." The officers hesitated, glancing at each other. Rena added, her voice steady and sure, "Please, this isn't just about us anymore. You know the Jari won't stop until they get what they want." Finally, one officer nodded, stepping aside. If you can help, do it quickly. We don't have much time. Inside the control room, the atmosphere was tense as technicians frantically attempted to reroute power and maintain the shields. Caleb immediately assessed the control panel, his mind moving as quickly as his hands. Rena assisted, quickly adapting to the interface and rerouting power from less critical systems. Caleb, she muttered, if this works, the shields will hold, but only for a few more blasts. It's all we need, he replied, clamping down a failing circuit, just long enough for the council to negotiate. Outside the viewport, the Jari ship loomed closer, its weapons primed for another assault. With a final push, the shields glowed brighter, absorbing the brunt of the next hit. The colony shook, but it held. Back in the council chamber, the comms officer intercepted a new message from the Jari commander. His voice, cold and sharp, resounded through the room. Our patience is at an end. Surrender the fugitive within the hour, or your shields will not save you. The council members exchanged wary glances, but Vela's expression hardened. We will stand by our decision. But the Trithar counselor, his brow furrowed with concern, addressed Caleb. Mr. Renner, if this colony falls, its people will pay the price. You brought us to this juncture. Are you willing to face the cost? Caleb straightened, meeting the counselor's gaze. I am. Rena deserves a life of her own. And if we give in to the Jari now, we'll be enabling them to trample over everyone who dares to stand up to them. This isn't just about one person anymore. It's about showing that the Alliance stands for freedom. The counselor considered his words, a glimmer of understanding flickering in his eyes. Finally, he looked to the others. Then we fight. The council gave the order, and the colony's defenses intensified, mobilizing all available forces. As the Jari ships launched their assault, the Alliance vessels responded, intercepting the strikes. Plasma blasts filled the expanse, and the colony held its ground, a testament to the resolve of its people. In the control room, Caleb and Rena watched the battle unfold, a mixture of dread and hope swelling in their chests. They knew that this was only the beginning, a single skirmish in a much larger conflict. But as the Jari ships began to retreat, forced to recognize that the Alliance would not surrender, a sense of victory settled over the colony. Rena turned to Caleb, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you for everything. He looked at her, a soft smile breaking through the exhaustion on his face. This isn't over yet, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As the colony settled back into a tense calm, Caleb and Rena knew that they had ignited something far greater than themselves. Their defiance had drawn the line, a statement to the galaxy that the Alliance would not bow to oppression. And in that fragile moment of peace, they took solace in the knowledge that they had given others a reason to hope, a reason to fight for a future where freedom could not be taken away. The aftermath of the Jari retreat brought a new sense of unity to the Alliance colony, but the tension lingered. Every inhabitant felt the gravity of the situation. This small victory had come at a cost. The Jari Empire was unlikely to forget this challenge, and Caleb knew their patience was finite. A week after the skirmish, Caleb was summoned to a high-level Alliance Council meeting. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and unease. Councilor Vela, her face etched with the lines of sleepless nights, greeted him. Renner, she began, leaning forward with an intensity that matched the stakes. The Jari have demanded another hearing. They're claiming this isn't over, that this colony has interfered with their rightful authority. Caleb met her gaze, unflinching. Are you willing to let them dictate terms? Vela shook her head. The Alliance won't back down, but we're balancing on a knife's edge. This colony can't withstand another direct attack. And now we've received word that Jari agents may have infiltrated neighboring systems to gather support. The counselor's words landed like a weight. The Jari didn't need to break through with ships alone. Their reach and influence could turn planets against the Alliance, undermining support from within. As Caleb absorbed the information, he felt a renewed determination. Then it's time we take this beyond just survival. We need to make the case for Rina's freedom, and for the freedom of anyone that Jari would claim as property. Rina, who had been quietly observing, nodded in agreement. If we show the galaxy the truth of what's happening, it may be enough to unite the colonies. The Jari's authority is based on fear and control, but if people realize they're not alone. Vela's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flicking between them. What you're suggesting would be unprecedented. An open campaign against Jari practices would likely spark rebellion across their territory. Caleb didn't hesitate. It's exactly what needs to happen. Over the next few weeks, Caleb and Rina worked tirelessly with Alliance communication officers to gather testimonials and evidence of Jari oppression. They compiled everything from stories of forced labor to instances of life debts unfairly imposed. The more information they uncovered, the more people throughout the colony began to realize the extent of the Jari's grip on countless lives. The campaign grew, reaching other colonies and drawing support from unexpected quarters. Merchants, ambassadors, and former debtors alike joined the effort, their stories forming a tapestry of resistance. News networks took up the story, and the Jari began losing the battle for control of the narrative. As the outcry spread, Alliance colonies strengthened their defenses, preparing for the inevitable backlash. Caleb became a reluctant spokesperson, his words broadcast across colonies. His message was clear. The right to live free from fear and oppression was a universal right, and those who stood with the Alliance would not stand alone. One night, as the colony celebrated a small victory, a newly allied outpost joining their cause, Caleb and Rina found a quiet spot overlooking the expanse of stars. The stars felt closer, more alive with the newfound sense of hope they had ignited. "Do you think this will be enough?" Rina asked softly, her gaze fixed on the heavens. Caleb took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his answer. "I don't know, but it's more than I ever thought possible. A few months ago, I was just a diplomat. Now," he trailed off, a mix of pride and disbelief in his voice. "You're fighting for something bigger," Rina finished, smiling. "And so am I." The moment hung between them, full of unspoken promises and shared resolve. They had started this journey to escape, to survive. But now, they were part of a movement that sought something far greater than themselves. Then, the retaliation came. The Jari struck not with ships but with whispers, spreading rumors and stoking fear among the colonies. Some territories wavered, fearful of becoming targets. For every colony that joined the Alliance's call, there was another that hesitated, unsure if it could withstand Jari fury. But the Alliance's resolve did not break. Caleb and Rina continued to advocate, traveling to colonies and meeting with leaders who sat on the fence. They reminded them that unity was their best defense, that in their shared strength lay the possibility of a future free from Jari dominance. Years passed. The resistance grew, spreading across systems, fueled by the courage of those willing to stand against oppression. Caleb and Rina had become symbols of defiance, their story inspiring countless others to fight for freedom. It was a hard-won journey, full of setbacks and sacrifices. The Alliance grew not just in numbers but in resolve, a formidable coalition that could hold its own against the Jari. And though the war for freedom was far from over, the tide had turned. The Alliance colonies had become a beacon of hope, a testament that even the strongest empire could not stand against the will of those united in their desire to be free. As Caleb and Rina looked back on all they had fought for, they knew that this was only the beginning. The journey they had started together had become a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. For they had shown the universe one simple truth, that freedom was worth any price.